Yarnaby. We see him in the Chapter 4 trailer stalking us before opening his jaws and eating us. But who is Yarnaby and what will he do in Chapter 4? Well, after I did some digging, I found out that Yarnaby might just be how Poppy and Kissy die, and maybe even be how Huggy comes back. Let's start off with the Chapter 4 trailer. It starts with us going down the elevator from the end of Chapter 3 with Poppy yelling about Kissy. Then when we get down to the bottom, we see the perspective of what seems to be Yarnaby because of the noises that he makes. We also see a lot of Poppy gas in the pipes around us, implying that they are all going somewhere. After this, we see the sign Cave 1C and then stalagmites, which seems to indicate that the prison that we will explore in Chapter 4 will be taking place in a cave area similar to the cave in Chapter 3 around the Playcare. We also see a new grab pack icon, which will be important later. After this, we see a toy disposal type area, which is really strange, judging by how valuable food is in the factory to all of the toys, possibly indicating that whoever Yarnaby isn't letting people down to the prison areas for some reason to get any food. After this, we see the prison cells we saw in the Steam screenshots. Now, although I don't think these mean much, it might show how some toys like the piano dinosaur we saw in the ARG came from. Or maybe we might see some bigger bodies we know were in the prison, like Bobby Bear Hug in the logbook. After this, we see a security camera specifically focusing on the player, and then soon after Yarnaby. But then we had a very weird scene that actually sparked this theory. In what seems to be a security or reception desk, we see a television with an eyeball on it that squints when it sees us before turning red. After this, we see Yarnaby open his mouth and eat the player. Now let's go back to that weird eyeball scene. The eyeball television is near a large security desk, implying that the eyeball we see has some sort of relation to the security cameras, implying that something other than Yarnaby is watching us in this chapter. Now we know that it can't be the piano dinosaur, which is more than likely a mini antagonist like Miss Delight. So that means it is either the prototype or Harley. The problem with it being the prototype is that we know Poppy had no idea about Yarnaby beforehand, because she told us that Catnap was the last of the prototype's defenses, which would mean that if it was the prototype, he would have most likely tried to kill us himself instead of just helping Yarnaby do it. This all leads me to believe that the one watching us has to be Harley Sawyer. I say this because of the amount of hints we've been getting about Harley recently. First, we saw him watching us in the recap videos through security cameras, which is exactly what we see in the Chapter 4 trailer. We also see where he is located in the Chapter 3 recap video behind a large wall of screens, which we know has to be somewhere in the cave or prison areas in Chapter 4. And second, we know that he was the creator and manipulator of Yarnaby. In the ARG, we see papers and transcripts stating how he manipulated a mentally troubled kid named Quinn Navidson, who was known to swap the heads of toys to make them look what he thought was pretty, intriguing Harley. Harley then manipulated him into trying harder on the Game Station minigames and not masking his intelligence, resulting in him being turned into Experiment 1166, who we know as Yarnaby. After this, Harley would become disappointed in Yarnaby because he saw that the experiment didn't encapsulate Quinn's intelligence. So he planned to manipulate Yarnaby by making himself Yarnaby's entire world, by making sure Yarnaby can only interact with him for years on end. After Harley did this, he just left Yarnaby. And because Harley was his world, Yarnaby became depressed and aggressive against any employee that tried to interact with him. But strangely enough, after this, we know that Harley just disappeared because of the Catnap VHS tape, where the employee says Harley is, let's just say, out of commission. Now the problem with this is that we hear Harley in the recap trailers watching us, meaning that he didn't fully die. This leads me to believe that possibly Harley came back to Yarnaby's cell, but instead of being greeted with happiness, Yarnaby killed Harley. I say this because we know Chapter 4 takes place in the prison, which is a weird place for Yarnaby to be unless he did something wrong. But you might be asking, how would Harley come back to life after he was killed? Well, let's look at the clear patterns of Yarnaby. When he was Quinn, he masked his intelligence and also was good at dissecting and replacing toys, effectively giving the equivalent of head transplants. Now, if we look at his model, we see that his face has an initial layer of teeth for tearing or grabbing, but he also has a second layer of teeth for an unknown reason. I believe that this reason is to bite off the heads of victims and store them for later. This leads me to believe that the entire time while Yarnaby was turned into a toy, he masked his intelligence around Harley and the other employees, appearing as a dog-like creature until Harley manipulated him. Now, from my guess, during this time, Harley at some point explained his goal of gaining immortality through the toys to Yarnaby because he thought he wouldn't understand. After Harley left, Yarnaby became depressed, leading me to believe that although he was masking his intelligence, he was devising a plan to make sure Harley can never leave again, which would lead Yarnaby to take Harley's head off the next time he saw him to transplant Harley's head onto a bigger body, effectively making him immortal. But because of how intelligent Yarnaby is in the extent of science and biology, from my guess, he made Harley into a being similar to the prototype in power. But also, because Yarnaby didn't want to be separated from him again, he made Harley be directly linked to him through electrical signals by giving Harley electrical powers, leading me to believe that when we saw the security cameras look at us, Harley was telling Yarnaby where we were and was directing him the entire time. The eyeballs we see could possibly indicate Harley as well, with the eye turning red when Harley is telling Yarnaby to strike, leading to the end of the trailer when the player is eaten by Yarnaby. It also makes sense why Harley wouldn't just kill Yarnaby and would help him, because he helped him achieve immortality. Now that we know Harley and Yarnaby are connected, let's talk about a huge fan theory right now that Yarnaby is the one who killed Kissy at the end of Chapter 3 and is going to swap Huggy's head with hers, bringing Huggy back to life. This is a possibility because we see Yarnaby somehow knowing exactly where we were at in the start of the trailer, possibly indicating that he took Kissy down and then went down to kill us. But the problem with this is that he is trying to get Kissy's body and not the head, leading me to believe that it was actually Harley's bigger body who attacked Kissy. From my guess, Harley was watching us and saw that Huggy, one of his favorites, was killed by us, and the prototype didn't instantly drag him away, causing him to watch through the security cameras to find out where Huggy was, to eventually drag him down to the prison to get him ready for a transplant. He then watched us and Kissy, waiting for us and Poppy to be away from Kissy for him to strike and take Kissy's body down for Yarnaby to transplant the bodies. Now, one of the only problems with this is that Harley was watching us throughout our entire playthrough, leading him to have no time to grab Huggy's body. This leads me to believe that Harley is sending Yarnaby or other toys like the piano dinosaur to do his bidding. If this is the case, then that means that what we thought about the factory was wrong before. Instead of there being two sides, being Poppy's and the prototypes, there were actually three sides, with Poppy, the prototype, and Harley all being on opposing teams. This would also be the reason why food was so scarce, because Harley was defending all of the food for his toys only in the prison, not letting the prototype have anything. However, this leads to a few problems, which are where the prototype is stored, and also how Poppy didn't know about Harley's side this whole time. Well, actually, it's pretty simple. When Yarnaby killed Harley, he stored his head inside of himself and waited for the hour of joy when there would be no employees defending his cell. Then he would get out of his prison and go to the labs where he would make a bigger body for Harley. After this, Yarnaby would go with Harley and possibly some other toys like the piano dinosaur to the middle of the prison, which is more than likely the yellow box we see in the 3 squares image. From my guess, they went here to either take control of the prototype or to control something else we will find out about in Chapter 4. But because after the hour of joy the poppy gas would be diverted, the prototype would be completely awake, causing the prototype to instead hunt them down. Because the prototype only would hate Harley, he more than likely just captured Yarnaby and the other toys and put them in a poppy gas room before Harley could do anything with them. This would also make sense because of the rooms with piles of dead toys. What if instead of them not being eaten because Yarnaby and Harley were defending them, they were not eaten because the poppy gas enveloped that room instead? What if the prison is actually where the prototype would store all of the heretics that Dog Day talked about in Chapter 3? And when we diverted the poppy gas, we woke up these heretics, most of which would be on Harley's side instead of just Poppy's, which would fit into the idea of the Steam page saying that there will be many allies in Chapter 4 as well. Anyways, let's get back on track. After Yarnaby was captured, Harley more than likely ran away into some sort of security room and used his powers of technology to watch and wait until we came along. When we came along, we diverted the poppy gas into the prototype's cell in the middle of the prison, which would also explain why the prototype didn't kill us at the end of Chapter 3, but instead assimilated catnap so he could withstand the poppy gas. However, when we did this, we inadvertently woke up Yarnaby and Harley's other toys, which would explain why Poppy wouldn't know how or why Kissy was attacked. This all would lead into the events in Chapter 4, with the multiple antagonists, the devs mentioned actually being Harley and Yarnaby. In Chapter 4, we will explore the caves and the prison area while Harley and Yarnaby are working together to take us down, with us having to stealthily traverse these areas to avoid them both. While we are exploring the prison, however, we might run into toys like Bobby or other failed bigger bodies before running into the Huggy-Kissy hybrid, who I think will work similar to the Dog Day scene, with Kissy saying some things before being killed by Yarnaby, and then used to bring Huggy back to life, who would chase us until we kill him for good. This would then lead into the regular end of chapter boss fight with us killing Yarnaby. Well, I would say that. But what if instead of killing Yarnaby, like how we did with every other toy, we instead turn him to our side? I say this because Yarnaby is the only toy we know so far who would have no reason to absolutely hate us, but he has every reason to hate Harley, leading to us teaming up with him to take down Harley. This would then lead to the end of Chapter 4, where we will probably see the prototype after he got done recovering from the poppy gas and accumulating catnap, now dragging Harley's bigger body to his cell after we kill him, leading to Chapter 5, where we will actually fight the prototype, leading to the end of Poppy Playtime. But what do you guys think? Make sure to like and subscribe.